トビデオ
It's hard to understate just how big the release of Ghost in the Shell was for the American anime fandom. With its theatrical release on November 18th, 1995, followed by its international home video release on April 26, 1996, Ghost in the Shell marked a huge turning point for how anime was seen outside its home country. While the medium was still niche in the West, Ghost in the Shell really caught the eye of the mainstream critics. Not since Akira, which kicked off the anime boom in the first place, had such an anime generated this much buzz outside the circles of the otaku. Critics lauded the film for its thoughtful, complex cyberpunk story about the human soul and its relationship with technology, and even those that didn't get the story still praised it for its breathtaking animated visuals and inventive cinematography that would later influence modern filmmaking as we know it. It even got critics talking about how a film of this magnitude deserved to be given a wide theatrical release, regardless of how niche it was. Film critic Roger Ebert stated in his 1996 review, "Ghost in the Shell is intended as a breakthrough film, aimed at theatrical release instead of life on tape, disc, and campus film societies." All of this praise was indeed music to distributor Manga Entertainment's ears, who had also co-financed the film with Bandai Visual and Production IG. And you better believe their fellow anime distribution competitors were taking notice. One of these companies was a scrappy little distribution company by the name of Pioneer. At the time, Pioneer was mostly known as the Tenchi Muyo people, and knowing that relying on one anime franchise, no matter how successful, wasn't viable in the long term, were looking to branch out with new titles. In the pre-Pokemon era of American anime fandom, distribution companies always had to keep their fingers on the pulse of popular otaku consciousness. The success of Ghost in the Shell proved that, for the time, anime fans wanted compelling cyberpunk anime with lots of action and complex thematic elements. Which, okay, they were already kind of doing that, but Ghost in the Shell proved that it could give distribution companies something that all production companies value almost more than money. So Pioneer had its mission: find a science fiction anime that dealt with mature themes in thoughtful ways to satisfy the prestige crowd of critics, but also still had an acceptable level of fist-pumping action to satisfy their everyday clientele. And it had to be a film. If it wasn't a film, they could accept an OVA that could be edited down into a film, and maybe, just maybe, even have a celebrity voice cast to add even more Hollywood status to the piece and really blow the socks off those critics. Luckily for Pioneer, they had an OVA they licensed all the way back in 1995 that fit all of the above criteria and decided, I guess it'll have to do. In the year 2046, overpopulation on Earth has led to the colonization of Mars. Mankind was able to terraform the hostile environment with the help of robots known as FIRST. Ross Syllabus, a world-weary police officer, has just been transferred to the Martian Police Department of Mars' capital city of St. Lowell. He asked for this transfer in order to escape the memory of his previous partner being murdered by a cyborg, an experience that has left him broken and with a prejudice against robots.
There's no way humans and robots are going to get along together. Besides, can't trust robots.
At the spaceport, he meets with his new partner, Naomi Armitage, a cocky, smart-mouthed loose cannon with a fashion sense that practically screams to be worn at anime cons.
Tell me, is that crazy getup you're wearing standard issue MPD uniform?
Of course not.
But right when the two get the formalities out of the way, they end up being witnesses to the murder of Kelly McCannon, the last country singer in the universe.
Her name was Kelly McCannon. Famous country singer. In fact, the only country singer in the universe. I guess this means they're extinct.
Ignoring how exactly a single genre of popular music can become extinct, the murder of McCannon ends up revealing the fact that she herself was a robot. A brand new, rare type of robot known as a third type that is almost indistinguishable from humans. No sooner than Syllabus and Armitage get their first case to find McCannon's killer that the killer reveals himself, an extravagant psychopath assassin by the name of René Danclau. Dan Claude states that his mission is to find and eliminate all the thirds, and he will stop at nothing to do so, whether it be by his own hand or helping stir up existing anti-robot riots to do his dirty work for him.
She had you all fooled. What should we do about her?
It's up to these two to capture Dan Claude and find out why is he targeting thirds, where did the thirds come from, why are all his victims female, and what exactly is Armitage's mysterious connection with the thirds. She's a robot! No, that's not even a big spoiler. That's the reveal of episode 1, and it makes Naomi both a potential target and someone who is specifically attached to this case. Released in 1995, just a few months before Ghost in the Shell, Armitage III is definitely an anime that I would call a forgotten classic, in that it had its day as a popular franchise discussed amongst anime fans, but it has mostly been supplanted by 24 years worth of other anime, only living on in the form of numerous Naomi cosplays over the years. But Armitage III is an anime worth revisiting. Not only does it deal with some interesting themes, and boy we'll get to those, but it also has one of the most fascinating localization stories that was ever wrought by the 90s anime boom. I don't think I've ever heard such a story about an anime so desperate for that sweet, sweet approval from the Hollywood crowd. Armitage III is a very involved title, so there's a lot to discuss in so little time. So why don't we actually get into the whole localization history that I had been hinting throughout this whole video up to this point, and then we'll get into the anime proper. Now, to fully understand why this squirrely localization happened in the first place, one has to put themselves in Pioneer's shoes. This Ghost in the Shell thing is really buzzing throughout the general anime populace, and is also making professional critics purse their lips and nod thoughtfully about this whole anime thing.
I like the look of the film. I like how simply moving the shadows, just little movements on each character, they do it all the time. It always grabbed me. I was always staring at this film.
You have to compete with that. You have a similar product to Ghost in the Shell in the form of a thoughtful cyberpunk mystery story that still has plenty of Lethal Weapon style action and banter between the two mains, but the problem is that it's an OVA. An OVA which, cutting out opening and closing credits, still runs at around 2 hours and 15 minutes. Which, in 1996, was a problem. You don't have movies with that amount of runtime unless it was titled The English Patient, or it had the White House get blown up at some point. So Pioneer edited down the OVA into a nice, lean 90-minute feature, thus creating two versions of the same anime. Armitage III, the OVA, and Armitage III, Polymatrix, the movie. But Pioneer did not just want to compete with Ghost in the Shell, they wanted to beat Ghost in the Shell. And they would do so by investing heavily in an area where Ghost in the Shell lacked. Ghost in the Shell, despite getting a lot of industry buzz and being a relative box office success in Japan and Europe, did not have much in the way of actual star power. Both Japanese and English dubs did the typical practice of employing voice acting lifers such as Akio Otsuka, Atsuko Tanaka, Richard Epcar, and Tom Weiner. And while Pioneer already had an English dub of Armitage III, they decided that the best way to bring anime to Hollywood was to bring Hollywood to anime. If there was a distribution company that could have done this type of Hollywood redub at this point in the anime boom, it was Pioneer. Pioneer, despite what I said in the beginning, were not that scrappy of a company. While they were a fairly small business at the time, they were also a small business with a lot of connections. The company was founded as part of a joint venture between Warner Music Group and electronics manufacturer the Pioneer Corporation in 1981. The company was then known as the Laserdisc Corporation because of their job to produce laserdiscs in Japan. In 1989, however, they decided to branch off in the anime, film, and manga industry and rename themselves Pioneer LDC Inc. This history allowed Pioneer to build up a lot of connections in the electronics, music, and film industry, so getting celebrities to do voices in their anime was not totally out of the question. This is especially true when you consider the state of their competitors. Manga Entertainment, being based out of England, had a lot more European and Japanese connections over American connections. Streamline Pictures, while having some industry connections being based in California, was actually downsizing at the time. Companies like Urban Vision and ADV had only just gotten off the ground, and God forbid John O'Donnell and his band of fools at Central Park Media spent even a fraction of their dollars on professional voice talent when this was good enough for them.
I just don't trust them or their message. They're insects feeding off of my city.
So Pioneer got star power for their Armitage III redub. But who exactly did they get? They wouldn't settle for any old celebrity, they needed recognizable names. The only actor in their original dub who would have raised some heads was Bryan Cranston.
He's gone already, the badge-toting terror in hot pants.
But his only well-known role at the time was being Jerry's dentist, and Malcolm in the Middle was still 5 years away. They only had enough in the budget for 2 celebrity voice talents, so they made sure to give those roles to the principal cast of Armitage and Syllabus. For Syllabus, Pioneer chose Kiefer Sutherland, a reasonably good get considering he was currently on a hot streak that began with A Few Good Men, and would have a busy year in 1996 playing both a rapist and a Klansman in 2 separate movies that year. For Armitage, they got Elizabeth Berkley.
No time! There's never any time! I don't have time to study! I'll never get into Stanford!
Yes, that Elizabeth Berkley. Jessie Spano herself. The same Elizabeth Berkley who had just gotten her Worst New Star award for last year's ultra campy classic, Showgirls.
I used to love Doggy Chow too.
Which, bad move, Pioneer. Berkley may have had name recognition at that point amongst the critics you wanted to impress, but it was definitely for all the wrong reasons.
There's one lap dance where you're just stunned that Elizabeth Berkley can do that with her body, but, I mean, twist around as much as she does, but it's not sexy at all.
But in the end, it didn't really matter. There's no real record of Polymatrix getting a theatrical release in the States, so it ended up being quietly ignored by the Hollywood machine. Either Pioneer got cold feet, or they couldn't get a theatrical chain to carry the movie for even a week. Whatever the case is, it seems like they just re-released it on video in 1997 and prayed it would find its audience there like it did for Ghost in the Shell. They were trying to force an anime to become a cult classic. And looking back on it, it didn't work. So I didn't want to make this the whole video talking about 2 different versions of the same damn anime, but I guess I'm obligated to do a brief compare-contrast with the 2 versions at hand. The difference between the 2 dubs are negligible at best. While there is obvious voice talent being put to use here, it's hampered by the direction being indicative of the times. More obsessed with matching lip flaps than actually delivering a good performance, making the readings come off stiff at times. There is, of course, a difference between the voice actresses for Naomi Armitage. Elizabeth Berkley, despite the initial skepticism, delivers a pretty good performance.
The name's Armitage. Ooh, what a sexy back. I just love broad shoulders.
She is putting her all into this role that requires her to be a smart-mouthed cowboy cop with a vulnerable center, something that the original voice actress Joyce Kurtz only put half the effort into.
Yeah, that's right, I'm a monster. Just another name for a third in your book. What are you gonna do? Destroy me? Why? What did we ever do to humans? If humans don't want me, then why did they create me?
Yeah, that's right, I'm a monster. I'm the monster society created. I'm the thing they blame for recession and social problems. I'm the scapegoat. If humans don't want me, why did they make me?
As for Kiefer Sutherland, harken forward to his performance as Venom Snake and you'll get a good idea of what to expect.
Well, I'm sick of all these cyborgs and humanoids and machines that only seem to copy us. Since I'm allowed to make a choice, I choose not to like something that pretends to be human.
But I think the big question is whether or not Armitage III works better as an OVA or as a movie. The Polymatrix version, I feel, has a tighter narrative because a lot of the scenes it removes involves plot points that feel unnecessary, such as a brief subplot about a group of android suicide bombers sent by Earth to keep stirring up anti-robot violence, but it's never really commented on outside the opening of episode 3, or the entire character of a corrupt president of a robotics manufacturing company whose only real role is to tell Syllabus what the audience already knows at that point. The role of his scenes are mostly relegated to conversations between Syllabus and his hacker friend Benny. On the other hand, the tightening of the script does create some pacing problems by making the events feel like they are happening way too fast. Armitage III, at its core, is a mystery story full of twists, turns, and red herrings. In the OVA, all the episodes end with one question being answered, but a whole new batch of questions springing up in the process. This structure of storytelling is better suited for an OVA format because it allowed both the characters and the audience to properly parse over every avenue before arriving to a conclusion. In Polymatrix, the quicker pacing ends up adversely affecting the mystery part of the story by making it feel like a barrage of questions and answers coming at you non-stop. For example, episode 2 revolves around the possibility of Armitage herself being the prime suspect. Dan Claude had just been arrested, Armitage revealed herself as a third and ran off, and rumors have been going around that she has been killing thirds as a way to, quote, in their suffering.
But she talked to me about it once. She pities the robots used for crime, so she kills them quickly.
Do you mean Armitage is a suspect?
Well, you can't just deny the evidence.
This is supported by scenes of Armitage skulking around the city in a tranquil fury while constantly going over the names of thirds in her visor. Now, of course, this is all just a red herring that is solved by Syllabus coming across Armitage, having a heart-to-heart with her, and finding out she was trying to solve the mystery on her own without police interference. But for a moment, you almost buy the fact that she's a suspect. It's a good example of a red herring. In Polymatrix, the red herring plot point gets brought up, but they cut out all the scenes of Armitage skulking around and Syllabus trying to find info on her, just to cut to the two of them having their conversation where we find out that she's not the suspect. It removes any mystery that Armitage could be the killer and makes the whole plot point feel so pointless that you wonder why they even brought it up in the first place. I will give Polymatrix points for having the better ending though. Both anime versions end around the same point, but the ending of Polymatrix really emphasizes the bittersweet nature of it all. Armitage and Syllabus walk away from the final battle unscathed, but realize that they are fugitives from the law and that they will have to spend the rest of their lives running, but they can take comfort in knowing that they have each other. The OVA, on the other hand, ends on a note that feels like it wrapped everything up a little too neatly, with Armitage and Syllabus literally riding off into the sunset to the next adventure in a convertible of all things. But that's enough comparisons between the two. While I personally think that the OVA is better, you can easily watch Polymatrix and get the same amount of satisfaction from it. Seek out the OVA if you really want to know the whole story. I still want to talk some more about Armitage III as a whole. I could talk about its animation, its great setting and art design, its structure, or how the design of Naomi Armitage can evoke certain feelings.
I just love a man who grovels. You must call me your queen.
But since this is a thought-provoking cyberpunk narrative we're dealing with here, one that was written by Serial Experiments Lane's own Chiaki J. Konaka, I might add, it would behoove us to spend the rest of this video talking about Armitage III's themes! Now, cyberpunk narratives having the theme of robots as an oppressed minority is certainly not new. In fact, it might as well just be the default theme for those kinds of stories. A part of Armitage III where we see this from an individual perspective is through Syllabus. He has the prejudice against robots and cyborgs because his partner was killed by one. It's your typical prejudice brought on by a traumatic, life-changing experience.
What could have possibly happened to you to turn you into such a sourpuss?
You wanna know? I'll tell you. Attune killed my brother.
Attune? No.
By moving past their prejudices, the character also moves past their traumas and becomes a whole new person.
Drunk.
Armitage III has an interesting take on this trope with the fact that Syllabus not only lost his partner in that accident, but also his leg, which needed to be replaced with a robotic one. Therefore, Syllabus's trauma not only manifests through prejudice, but also self-loathing in that he is no longer fully human.
You gotta be kidding! A fake leg? Surely the ironic humor of this hasn't escaped you. You're almost a stinking cyborg yourself, you freak!
But after a fight with Dan Claw that leaves him near death, Syllabus winds up with his arm and most of his chest being replaced by robotics, essentially making him 50% robot.
Ironic, isn't it? Little by little, you're becoming like the robots you hate so much.
Is that at this point, Syllabus starts accepting himself as not fully human and starts becoming a lot more honest with his feelings towards Armitage, culminating with him and Armitage consummating their relationship to show that he has moved past his prejudices as well as his trauma. But this theme really comes alive when you observe the events going on in the macro of Armitage III. All throughout the series, there are anti-robot demonstrations going on throughout the city. They are a byproduct of a movement that is pro-humanity, and are mainly motivated due to the fact that the robots took their jobs!
They took our job! They took our job!
Not only that, but there is a special hatred reserved for the thirds, a type of robot humanity sees as an aberration, a perversion of humanity. How dare these machines flawlessly imitate the ones that created them, gave them life, allowed them to feel emotions and memories that, up until a point, only humans could feel. This hatred is portrayed as both a societal evil and an absurdity. A great deal of inner turmoil that Armitage has is the fact that she was created by humanity to feel emotions, have memories, and experience free will. By having these qualities, the very species that created her also want her destroyed.
I feel like some kind of grotesque puppet. I can walk and talk, and I can laugh, and I can cry. But I'm only a monstrous doll!
But this isn't your average Hollywood prejudice by individuals or even a heavy-handed tut-tutting of systemic discrimination.
You stank.
This is actually something you rarely see commented on in media, the idea of a scapegoat minority. You see, Dan Claude's mission is not only to kill the Thirds, but also routinely stir up human on robot violence, release the names and addresses of Thirds, cause riots, make carefully worded speeches that play into people's prejudices against robots.
This is Jessica Manning, a snobbish bourgeois artist who lives and works right here among you. She had you all fooled.
He does this because it benefits the pro-human government of Earth. Not just because they are pro-human, but because the Earth government is trying to get the Mars colony back under their fold as a vassal state. The Mars colony was only able to terraform the surface and gain independence in the first place thanks to the First and Seconds. Once their role in the equation is reduced by Earth agreeing to send more humans to fill the roles of robots to Mars, the Martian people see no reason to keep the robots around and therefore are far more willing to give up their independence. It's a really good political commentary on how governments deliberately sow prejudice amongst the masses in order to control them. By creating an other for people to unite against, it allows those in power to command the masses to do what they want in exchange for subduing that created other, even if it's against the people's best interests. But we're not stopping there just yet. There's an extra layer to this systemic oppression, and this is where it gets a little complicated in more ways than one. So you notice how every Third we've seen so far is female, or how every second is an overly sexualized gynoid, or how even the sole male Third, Julian, looks like every racist femboy on Twitter hiding behind a smug anime avatar?
What's the matter? Have I touched a nerve? Maternal clock ticking?
Well, there's a reason for the first two at least. A reason that we need to bring in the two deadliest words one could utter in a YouTube video. And that's feminist themes! Might as well just set the comment section on fire right now and save you all the trouble. Okay, now this is the part of the video where I must say that I'm going to spoil everything in Armitage III that hasn't been spoiled already. So if you still want to go into this anime relatively clean, now's your chance to hop off, okay? Okay. So right around the time that Syllabus gets out of the hospital, he meets up with his hacker friend Benny, who takes him over to the morgue where they go over Kelly McCannon's corpse one more time. It turns out that they missed something in the initial autopsy. It turns out that, at the time of her murder, the robot country singer Kelly McCannon was...
A country western singer here? She was pregnant.
It turns out that the main function of the Thirds was not just to perfectly imitate humanity and have them be the leaders of art, science, and athletics, but also help rebolster the declining Martian birth rate.
He created the ultimate woman who could kick ass and raise children.
He designed you two.
Yeah, but I can't get pregnant.
And before you start making those jokes, I should let you know that we aren't even close to being done yet. Not by a long shot, so strap in. The reason why the Martian birth rate is so low is because society on Earth has become increasingly feminist, and actively encourages males to immigrate to Mars while discouraging females to do the same. And yes, the anime actually does use the word feminist by name.
The Earth Federation is now strongly feminist. A robot who can conceive contradicts the basis of the Terran Party's position of basic humanity.
And the feminist government wants the Thirds annihilated in exchange for sending female immigrants as a reward. Thus they send Dan Claude, who is actually a series of modified Thirds called Assassinoids built in the likeness of their creator, Dr. Rene Dan Claude, to eliminate all the Thirds under the guise of assassinations and pogroms. Any investigation into this is closed immediately, the Earth government has their hands clean, and they already have their unwitting fall guys in the form of Armitage and Syllabus. Now, I hope you can see why this specific plot point is, troubling. The anime does not vilify feminism, at least not outright, but it's still an awkward thing to hang the crux of the narrative on. After all, this can easily be interpreted as the ideology of feminism being the antagonist force behind everything, which, considering Japan's track record with women's rights, is not that big a conspiracy theory. Plus, the definition of feminism used here is very broad, as if to imply that a matriarchy has superseded the patriarchy. So it could be interpreted that one is just as bad as the other, but I hopefully don't need to tell you why equating what's implied to be 50 years of matriarchy to millennia of patriarchy is complete horseshit. What even is the school of feminism being displayed here? Radical? Liberal? Difference? Well, considering that the Earth government wants Mars to be completely dependent on them both politically and economically, and that the figurehead for the Earth's government bears a slight resemblance to Margaret Thatcher, one could argue that the feminism on display by the government is a school that relies heavily on neoliberalism. But that still doesn't change the fact that this plot point can be interpreted as anti-feminist. But if you look at it a certain way, it can also be interpreted as feminist? Hear me out. The whole killing the thirds as a part of a ploy to get Mars back under Earth control bit is actually just a byproduct. The government's true ambitions are far more ideological in nature. They want to eliminate the thirds because they do not want the biological role of women to be replaced by a group of people that they don't consider to be real women. The thirds have emotions, thoughts, memories, free will, the ability to love and conceive a human child. And yet because they were all created in a factory or laboratory somewhere, they cannot be considered real women. This designation is a huge point of angst for Armitage because she knows she's a third and yet no one else does. She overhears every day about how the thirds are nothing more than dolls imitating women, rather than actually being women.
I'm sick of all these cyborgs and humanoids and machines that only seem to copy us. Since I'm allowed to make a choice, I choose not to like something that pretends to be human. Huh?
And yet it contradicts her true feelings. To her, those feelings are real. The memories she has are real. She is a real woman, but because she was born a robot, she can never be seen as one to other people. It's the reason why her and Syllabus consummating their relationship is such an important endpoint to their arcs. It makes Syllabus accept the fact that he is no longer fully human, and that is okay, and it makes Armitage accept the fact that she is just as real as any human.
But I'm not normal. I'm a robot.
I'm half robot too, but I know a true heart when I've met one.
Of course, it does defeat the feminist reading of it all if Armitage needed a man to fully see that, but you get the idea. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the antagonistic force of Armitage III isn't so much feminism as it is a negative form of feminism that only benefits the privileged. A robot exclusionary radical feminist version of feminism, or RERFs for short. They appear to see that human women who are already in a position of power are the only ones worthy to benefit from the strides that feminism has taken over the years. This is reflected by the fact that they are essentially organizing a genocide against a minority they see as not true women. It also might be reflected in how they view the seconds, who are all given highly sexualized designs and assigned occupations that the women of Earth could see as beneath them, such as secretaries, or stewardesses, or sex workers. So really, the possible anti-feminist themes of Armitage III might actually really be feminist because the feminism practice in it is obviously exclusionary and is only there to reinforce existing power structures rather than truly liberate. Does that reading make this particular plot point okay? Not really. It's still a prickly point of contention, and even though authorial intent is a load of bull and we can draw our own conclusions, it's definitely not going to stop people from assuming the worst. But in the end, Armitage III is still a pretty good anime. You can sit down and enjoy either the OVA version or the Polymatrix version and still come away relatively entertained. It's got great action, great designs, great animation, and engages with its own themes in a careful and reflective manner, even if those themes do come off as suspect. And while it did come into some initial success with both versions, it didn't leave the legacy that Pioneer wanted. Maybe it was the result of poor timing, or Pioneer trying to force a cult classic to happen rather than let it grow on its own, but Armitage III's time in the sun was brief before being completely eclipsed by other sci-fi titles that came before and after it. A fate I don't think it fully deserved, because it was an anime that took some chances with its story and themes and crafted a cyberpunk narrative that felt distinct. Plus, it was an anime where declining birth rates were a huge plot point, and it didn't come off as overly preachy or reactionary for the most parts. And I gotta say, not bad for an anime that has a heroine with the nickname the Badge-Toting Terror and hot pants.